Good morning, everyone, or good afternoon, and good evening, depending on where you are. It is a pleasure to be here with you. I'll be the moderator in this panel, which is part of the World Forum of Circular Economy. And now talking about how to improve plastic circularity. On the last 13th and 14th of May, we spoke about circularity and a few challenges. And today we have very special guests representing many of our stakeholders who share with us some of these challenges working in the recycling chain, which is key for circularity. Sorry, I didn't introduce myself. I'm Fabiana Quiroga, Director of Circular Economy at Braskem here in South America. And I want to thank our guests for being here with us, and also thank you all, those of us in this in-person audience, and also those of you connected online with this meeting. Please send us your questions, and those of you here, you will be able to use a microphone to talk about your comments and to ask your questions. We have two announcements. If you're coming tomorrow, please keep your badges, and the cord you've received can be used to charge your mobile phones. So we can reuse it. It doesn't have to be disposed of at the end of the meeting. Let us call our guests. Erich Netto, Institutional Director of the Recycling Institute, the Recicleiros Institute or Recyclers Institute. Camila Obner, Manager, and today representing André Passos Cordeiro, Executive President of Abiquim, who had another appointment. So thank you so much for being with us on last minute notice. Then João Zeni, Director of Sustainability in Latin America for Electrolux. Thank you for being with us. And Jacob Duer, CEO of the Alliance to End Plastic Waste.
Bom, pessoal, acho que ontem,
So yesterday and in the last few days, we had a chance to discuss about the circular economy, how urgent it is, and how dearly we need material action because we're facing a challenge in terms of scarcity of resources. We need almost 2 planets considering what mankind is currently consuming. And that's not sustainable. When we talk about climatic change, this is our reality today. Look at all the natural disasters we've witnessed. And in this context, today we came here to speak about plastic circularity, and plastic is still key. I mean, we have to use plastic to extend the useful life of food and other products. Plastic is also used in the automotive industry, bringing lighter vehicles, so therefore fewer emissions. Plastic was also extremely important for humans during the COVID-19 pandemic. However, plastic waste causes impact. And we have to think about that because today we still live in a linear economy. We produce, we use, and we dispose of the product. And we have to change our frame of mind and begin to think in circularity. So we can try and reduce consumption, and when we consume, we have to think about how to make that product part of the circular economy. And at Braskem, we are developing solutions with recyclable content. What used to be waste becomes a new raw material. So our industry is working with that, but we need more stakeholders collaborating so we have a true circular economy. And that is the reason why we invited different stakeholders who represent bonds of this chain to speak about the evolution, the changes, and how we can further leverage the circular economy. Let us kick this start with Erich. Erich, tell us how the Recicleiros Institute began. What was your initial motivation? And how do you work with waste collection and separation? What is the relationship you have with the government? Good morning, everyone. Those of you in person, those of you online, thanks for the invitation. It's an honor to be here. It's always a pleasure to discuss about this topic. As Fabi mentioned, we are on the front line because we work in the first bond of this chain to recover waste after consumption. But we also focus our efforts on advocacy. We don't want to become operators, but we know that if we are in operations, then we can truly understand what happens, and therefore we can translate that into knowledge. Knowledge will lead us to a bigger scale. Our Recicleiros Institute came from the university. You know, all of us, the founders, Ana Luisa, Rafa, Gustavo, we were students at the university, and we began to talk about how we could make our cities a better place where people would consume, dispose of the packaging in the right place, and that would be collected and it would become raw material for other products. And so this is what we dreamed of at the Catholic University here in Sao Paulo. We used this idea for our dissertation, and then we built the Institute. So at that time, you know, when we decided to set up the Institute to revolutionize Brazilian cities, I mean, there was a long leap because we are talking about 2006. Brazil did not even have the solid waste national policy. And we did not have the capacity to do what we dreamed of. But we began to work with waste pickers and then recyclers. Then companies would hire us to provide data and consulting. But things were not really connected. It was very difficult to make these different bonds become part of a chain. So this was the origin. This was the beginning of this movement 20 years ago. Today we have 83 people working in the Recicleiros Institute and developing action in our projects, and 350 waste pickers working in our social and professional training programs. We have 15 local administrations engaged in our project. And since the waste policy was launched, we began to work connecting logistics and different companies on the market. So we want to be present in all municipalities of Brazil, 5,700 municipalities, because we want to gain scale. We recently launched a project with the government of Pernambuco. The origin was Serra Talhada, one of these small towns in Pernambuco, and they are now part of our platform. Actually, the Alliance to End Plastic Waste, is also a member of our platform. Anyway, so we had a business case. We discussed with the state government, and the governor could see an opportunity to bring more scale to that project. We signed an agreement with the government of Pernambuco, and now through the Recyclers Academy, we're going to provide training to 184 municipalities in the state of Pernambuco, of which 4 will be selected, so that we will have 5 pilot projects in the state of Pernambuco. So this is what we do. That's great. It's beautiful to see how your seed was sowed, how your idea became a true impact after 20 years of work. And congratulations on your resilience, because you continued in your search for transformation. Now, I'm going to ask a few questions to Jacob, but I will speak in English.
Jacob, the AEPW, Alliance to End Plastic Waste, has been supporting several projects in Brazil, including Recicleiros, as Erich mentioned. Could you tell us more about AEPW and the work you've been doing in recent years, please?
So thank you very much, and great to be here, and apologies that I have to speak in English. So for those of you who don't know the Alliance to End Plastic Waste, we are a non-profit organization established 5 years ago. We're headquartered in Singapore, so quite far from here, operating in key countries around the world and trying to create solutions for ending plastic waste leaking into the environment and creating a circular economy for plastic. We're funded by the private sector. Braskem is one of our members. Companies across the plastic value chain, so resin producers, brands, and retailers, converters, recyclers, waste managers, everyone who touches on plastic as part of their business model can be and are members of the Alliance. And the way that we are looking at it is, and we talked about that, about creating solutions to an increasingly, on one hand, growing environmental problem, but also a resource efficiency challenge that the world is faced with. We've all seen the terrible pictures on television and in newspapers. 10 million tons of plastic waste is entering our ocean every year. We need to make that come to an end. And one of the key reasons for why plastic waste ends up in the environment is that waste management systems is lacking in many, many countries. 3 billion people on this planet have no access to waste collection. So there's simply nowhere to go for these communities and families and individuals with their waste. They can leave it in the environment. They can take it to a dump site, they can take it down to the beach or to a riverside, or they can burn it. We want to create solutions so that any waste does not end up in the environment, and the waste that is valuable, that is being collected and ultimately recycled, creating a circular economy. Studies have shown that if we are purely looking at plastic, that the value of plastic that ends up, let me call it, in the wrong place, environment, open dump sites, landfills, even incineration being burned, has a value of somewhere between $80 and $120 billion a year. So if we can bring that value back into the system through a circular economy, there is an incredible efficiency in terms of use of resources that can be optimized and gained. So the Alliance is about creating solutions in this space. We have access to capital. We have access to technical knowledge and expertise, and we are working with governments in supporting efforts, policy efforts addressing waste management and plastic pollution more broadly, coming in with knowledge and expertise, coming in with funding, and showcasing how plastic leakage can be stopped, how it can be made economically viable, and ultimately how it can be made sustainable. We have operated in around 25 countries since we got established 5 years ago. But we have sort of taken an approach now that says in order for us really to move the needle and in order for us really to move and drive impact at scale, we need to narrow our focus and go a lot deeper into the countries where we are operating. Brazil is one of those countries where we want to engage further. As you mentioned, Fabiana, we have already had a few projects here, but we see an incredible potential here, both in terms of private sector engagement, but also because the government, under the leadership of President Lula, is taking a very progressive approach to addressing pollution, in particular working with informal waste pickers, cooperatives, etc., in terms of waste, including plastic waste collection. We can't do it alone, so it needs to be done in partnership with not only with governments and private sector, but working with civil society organizations, entities like Recicleiros as well, but also finance institutions is absolutely fundamental. This is a challenge that has a size that resources of significant amounts are required. We are talking hundreds of millions of dollars, if not billions of dollars, and no single entity is sitting with that amount of resources. So part of our approach to solving for the problem is not only to help creating the solutions, but also working with particular development finance institutions that can be global ones like the World Bank of the IFC, but also the Development Bank of Brazil. We are having conversations with many others to see how can we bring our common agendas around circularity together in trying to solve for a common problem. What we're also seeing, which is quite exciting, is there's a very busy and active sort of startup space out there. And just walking through here, I see that Plug and Play has a representation, which is one of our partners as well. So over the last 2 or 3 years, the Alliance has incubated more than 150 startups with new ideas and solutions on plastic waste and recycling, education, and what we call design for circularity. These 150 startups, they have attracted more than $160 million of investment. So there's a huge appetite for investing into the challenge around circularity, creating a circular economy for plastic. So we see that there is a growth, we see that there is energy, and we see that new ideas are coming to the forefront. But in order for us to move fast, we need to identify them, and then we need to test the technologies that are coming and the solutions, and then we need to inject capital. For the same reason, the Alliance launched a private equity fund on plastic circularity a few years ago, and that fund is really fully focused on investing into sustainable, scalable, and impactful solutions on addressing plastic pollution. So we need a range of solutions from private sector engagement, from investment into private sector companies at different stages in their growth, working with companies that you see here on this panel, but also those that you are representing, as well as working with governments to ensure that the right policies are in place so that there is incentives, there is political pressure in the positive sense of that word, so that companies drive the right approaches to addressing the issue of plastic pollution.
Great, thank you. Eu acho que a gente vai entrar pouquinho mais sobre a questão dos desafios.
Now let's talk about challenges and opportunities, but having a global institution involving different links in the chain and looking for investment funds is extremely important. We had the opportunity of listen to different speakers during the forum, and many people spoke about funding. In order to lever circularity, we have to have the appropriate funding so that we can lever them. It's great to have IAPW looking at Brazil as an opportunity to invest. And talking about representative entities, Abiquim represents the Brazilian chemical industry, and that has put the circular agenda in its core, especially plastics. I'd like you to share what are the main challenges for the industry to adopt circular economy practices and how to adapt the generation and the use of plastics or reuse of plastics in Brazil. Thank you, Fabi, for the invitation. Good morning, everyone. I'd like to salute to those who are with us online as well. Well, the idea of circularity dates back to the 70s. First, people thought of regenerative design. That evolved, and in the 90s, people started talking about the economic model we debate today, which is the circular economy model. So, the world has been building knowledge and expertise about this new model that sort of boomed. I think that we are past the point of no return. I think that this transaction has to happen. We have to shift away from a linear model to a circular model. And I believe that now when we we have already built up knowledge, now we have to put them into practice. We believe that actions have to be interconnected globally because they encompass the whole world. So we have to have international cooperation to make things happen. So looking at plastics, circular economy, this global action is underway based on the UNIA resolution that provided for a binding instrument to fight the plastic pollution, including the seas, should be drawn up and implemented. So the debate is on the table for a global agreement on plastics. This debate has been happening since the late 2002, when we had the first round of negotiations in order to achieve the agreement of all the countries around the table. This debate should have been completed in November last year, when we had the fifth round of negotiation, and Abiquim has been taking part in all the rounds of negotiations, but unfortunately, we haven't completed the debate. We haven't wrapped up the debate. In August, there will be another round of negotiations in Geneva, trying to adopt a final instrument. Yesterday, Isabella Teixeira in the forum made a very fortunate statement. She talks about the circular economy, where the debates are not based on consensus, but rather on common interests. And I think we should use that in order to land an agreement on plastics. There are extremely important geopolitical decisions, and we have to take them into account when we talk about circularity, when we talk about this shift in the economy. So we are about to have a common interest, and we hope that this will leverage the management of plastic waste. We hope that this tool will make countries to enact national plans so that countries coordinate so that we have more rational waste management or plastics management. We hope that it will be able to induce public policies in different countries aiming at the green transition. And the global agreement is a very important tool to attract funding, especially for developing countries that lack this financing to improve its waste management. And looking at Brazil, we see major breakthroughs. Last year, we had the publication of the Brazilian strategy for the circular economy. Last week, the work plan for the circular economy was approved. We have to have public policies at country level, and we hope we'll have other tools that will speed up transition towards circularity. Now, looking at plastic, we look forward for the publication of the bill about reverse logistics for plastic packagings. We had several debates about the decree or the bill. As far as we know, the bill has already been drawn up. We hope it will be published soon. It approaches governance, supply issues, and for the chemical industry in Brazil, it talks about recyclable content. And this has everything to do with the circular economy that should leverage circularity of plastics in Brazil. So with goals of recycled content, we'll be able to revalue the material, leverage materials that are not recycled yet, governance processes, and I think we'll have a better insertion of waste pickers in the process, because the material is going to be valued. I think that this policy should be, or the bill should be enacted soon, so that we have a powerful lever for the transition. Without this kind of public policy, it's very difficult for a country to go forward. And when we talk about public policies, I mean not only technology, but I mean tax breaks. Today we have very few tools, few and far between instruments for tax breaks for recycled material. Abiquim has been working on it. We want tax breaks to help the transition that Brazil decided to take forward. One last remark. It's very important that plastic material is also valued. For everything you said, Fabi, a study that the global chemical industry, the global chemical industry hired a consultant about the decarbonization of the chemical industry, and that study shows that carbon present in plastics is important for decarbonization. I'm talking about the chemical industry, but I'm talking about decarbonizing the world, because the carbon inside the polymer is valuable when it goes back into the chain. So we shouldn't forget about that too. Very good. Now, talking about valorization or value of recycled material, we have João representing the brand that gets to the consumers. It's closer to consumers at large. So talking about demand, value, etc., I'd like to ask you, how do you see the evolution of consumers? Is there a higher demand for sustainable products? And how does that impact Electrolux strategy? I am pleased to be here with you. Thank you for the invitation. I think everybody is familiar with Electrolux. We are present all over the world, 120 countries, one of the most important household appliances manufacturer, headquartered in Sweden. And going back to what you said, Fabi, maybe the answer I'm going to give you is not what everybody wishes to answer. We have invested a lot in sustainability, in circular economy, and we try to bring that into business value or make it business value. And we have to prove that there is value. But when we survey consumers, and we survey consumers very often, we see a trend. Consumers say that they are concerned about sustainable development, but when we try to eliminate the bias of the politically correct answer, because everybody says that they are concerned, because it wouldn't look good if they didn't. But when we remove the bias, we see that the purchase drivers are different. You know, in the purchase drivers, sustainability ranks 5th or 6th. Of course, durability is an interesting thing, but price, design are rank amongst the top 1st or 2nd. So when we look at other layers that should be considered, at Electrolux, we look at that as an opportunity. If people, of companies, do not see the circular economy as an opportunity, they run serious risks in the futures. I'm going to touch upon two main aspects. The first one is politics that are being enacted, and it will be mandatory or in binding. And now, there is the Brazilian plan for the national economy that will unfold in further regulation in the near future. So it's important to look at the chain, look at partners, etc. That's all, suppliers, that's important. Another thing that's important is to look at what's happening in Brazil. For instance, recent policies on reverse logistics unblock interesting opportunities. For instance, the reverse logistics has brought 40,000 tons of household appliances into recycling. So we can have a much better plastic, with a much better quality. So that might represent competitive advantage when we seize the opportunities at the right moment. So we see that as a business opportunity, as competitive advantages. So it's very important to seize them. I see the advance of circular economy being blocked by the balance between demand and supply. If there is not clear demand, they won't do anything about recycling plastics or reusing material. So the industry has to innovate, but innovation has limits. I'm not romantic enough to say that we're going to pay more for recycled material. Our industry has a cutthroat competition, and you have to be competitive. Innovation has limits, and there is also the other side of regulation. So the tension over the industry, even if the consumer doesn't think it's a buying driver, for us it's extremely important because we use plastics and steel. And to try and wrap up, I found that I had to mention a survey of Euromonitor about the household appliance white line all over the world, and their survey said that the efficiency of the product in water, energy consumption, functionalities will become a commodity in a while. Everybody has the similar rates. Now the differentiation will come from new business models and circular economy. So we have to tread that path. So that made this theme very important for us, and that's when we launched the most ambitious goal by 2035 to have 35% of used content in our products. That's very difficult because our plastics are really technical. You have to have good looks and so on, but we have to innovate. Maybe the consumer is not looking at it, but there are other layers and other drivers that make it a very important point. If we don't have competitiveness, we don't have innovation. When you have a difficult situation, you take steps back. But if you do something that has economic value, then you'll go forward. I think that regulation will spur demand, and that's a way to speed up the circular economy. But in each one of the links, and I'd like to ask Erich, what other challenges are we faced with to speed up recycling and to impart competitiveness into the chain? You are at the front end, so to speak. We're talking about costs, logistics costs. That's another calculation basis for costs. What about the involvement of other stakeholders in order to have more competitiveness to speed up recycling in Brazil? Well, very important comments by Camila and João that put things into context. When we talk about major challenges, when we think about circular economy, it's a closed loop, and this loop consists of a number of links that range from consumption, disposal, going through public systems of urban cleaning and recycling and the reinsertion into the industrial chain. But the whole chain is very precarious. When we look at Brazil, going beyond the speeches, when we get to the field in over 5,000 cities. I live in a capital in Santa Catarina, capital city, and even though it has a policy of zero garbage, we still have a lot of failures along the chain. So Camila mentioned the national decree for the use of plastics, etc. These are essential elements. Otherwise, competitiveness is not essential. Okay, João said I would like to use recycled material, but the prices shouldn't be higher. But if you have mandatory reverse logistics, the mandatory return shouldn't compete with the virgin resin because it is cheaper. This is an obstacle the industry has to overcome. We have to look at things from different perspectives. When we get down to brass tacks, we don't have accountability, we don't have awareness, we don't have appropriate action, we don't have investment, a number of things that will only be solved if we look at it in a holistic manner. There is no magic wand that will deliver millions and millions of recycled material tons. The magic wand lies in constancy, lies in believing in the process. And if we don't have outreach to recover material at the end of their life cycle, and we should that because our public policy includes waste pickers. We see waste pickers abandoned all over the world. I mean, they have no social protection all over Brazil. There is no point in fishing. One example from São Paulo, the capital city of São Paulo. Even in São Paulo, not all the cooperatives have proper structure. There is another example in Rio de Janeiro. When we talk about success cases, they're always the same. I've been doing this for 20 years. I started when I was at the university, and I have seen the same plastics that were not recycled, not being recycled because they have a pigment or because there is a logistic problem or because it's flexible and there's no demand. I see the same problem of compensation beyond falling short of the cost. When we look at the Brazilian information system, they say 50% of municipalities have the selective waste collection. Then you have one single truck that is driven one day but not the other. When you look at that as a service to the population as it should be, okay, I'm going to include another new truck tomorrow, and the population does not comply. Germany, who has been investing in that for over 40 years, has to fight every day to increase the rates of recycling and compliance. But we can't believe that this system will be implemented if we don't have public policies, commitment from the local authorities, compliance on part of the citizen when they get to the sorting depots or warehouses. We found a more competitive model, a more efficient model. Let's debate it. But these units should also have ethical protocols of production. You get to a middle-sized cooperative in Brazil, they don't have an appropriate plant. which is not productive and does not produce a cost-benefit ratio. No appropriate restrooms, there's nobody to buy the material. We have an account at Recicleiros that we have been debated, and we're going to publish shortly about the feasibility of the initial link of the value chain. To sum up, if you apply ethical working concepts, I'm not talking about feasibility. Our country says that the minimum wage is the minimum wage. So let's begin the spreadsheet with the minimum wage, an ideal plant with a good productivity rate, 25 kilograms man hour, a plant that has trained people, that has skilled workers. We are going to produce 1 ton of the mix of post-consumption waste by 1,200 reals, paying a minimum salary and an excise tax. When you are going to sell the mix, well, it varies depending on the region of Brazil. You get paid 650 reals. So you pay the double in order to deliver quality material to the production chain. If you're able to keep someone with a minimum wage of 1,500 and without prospects, you train this waste pickers and he can find a much better job working in the supermarket. Then you train again, and then we don't have money for maintenance because we have been debating with municipalities pay per service, fee per service. If we don't understand that this is a circular environment, it's a chain. If you use navy blue PET, you should be blamed for it. If you use EPS, you have to pay for it. I have to have environmental compensation policy where I cannot buy 1 bottle of something to compensate a ton of other. So we have to invest. We should believe in the process. We shouldn't believe in magic wands. That doesn't happen anywhere in the world. And we should build the appropriate infrastructure. But that takes time. That requires a lot of investment and a very big honesty about what should be done. And of course, those who are willing to do it should put the bar a bit higher up. You cannot put 1 ton of material that comes from exploitation. You cannot put the stamp of recycled material and in a packaging that has never been recycled in Brazil, but goes on to the shelf with a stamp. So all this should be avoided so that we can go forward.
Very good. What a great overview. You summed up all the main challenges we face, domestically and internationally. We have a list of questions, but because you are here in person, let me ask my audience if you have any questions. And I've also received a list of questions here. But first, I'd like to ask those of you here in the audience if you have a question. Hello everyone. Good morning. This discussion sounds like music in my ears. But sometimes this is heavy metal music, And I come from Salvador, where we listen to Axé. I come from Solos, and we work with Recicleiros, we work with Braskem. You are both references for us at Solos. And today we are discussing about how to work on this agenda, having a more direct connection to the climate crisis. Because in Brazil, we still talk about waste from the sanitary viewpoint and also from the standpoint of social inclusion. Because as we work, we also see groups of very vulnerable people. However, I believe we have to make this agenda a bit sexier especially because this year we're going to have the Conference of Parties, COP30, here in Brazil. So how can we make this more direct connection? You know, when discussions are about mitigation or um, the climate crisis, and also how you've been working to try and decentralize the efforts away from Sao Paulo and Rio. I come from the Northeast, and what I see is that we are lagging behind compared to Sao Paulo or compared to Rio de Janeiro. So I'd like to hear from you about that. You want me to answer? I have just answered the other question, but all right. Yes, I can try and contribute my grain of sand. For us, we always conduct the life cycle analysis of all our products. And the second main impact we have on climate is the raw material. So that makes it really clear for us, you know, there is a direct connection between the circular economy and climate management. And I'd like to say that we already have products with more than 50% recycled contents, and 70% of all products made in Brazil also have a certain amount of recycled content. So that is an advance. When you talk about decentralizing the infrastructure, we still have to build more infrastructure. I think our company is one of the ones that invests the most in reverse logistics, you know, because of the number of products we have, and we have a huge logistic cost. Last year, we invested millions of US dollars to implement reverse logistics. And so now we have to understand how we can find opportunity to use these materials that are coming back to the chain. Sometimes these are high quality materials. You know, in electrical appliances, you have materials that can truly be reused. So we are detecting new opportunities. And we've been talking to some of our partners. Today, our reverse logistics, we do it by ourselves, but we want to do that in partnership. I don't want to pay alone for all the logistics, but still, I want to recycle my products after they are consumed. So we must begin to work in partnership to be able to bring these materials back to the productive chain. I think we still have a lot to do ahead of us. But we see innovation, and the industry more and more is accepting this financial responsibility. And we will see also more regulations. But look at the size of this country. The question is very good. I'd like to add, we work with raising awareness because we believe this is really important in this chain. And when we talk about climate emergency, that has the power to mobilize maybe more than talking about waste recycling. And we conducted this survey in a number of Brazilian cities. And the result was always the same. 83% of the people say that recycling is very important, and they say they do it. However, when you look at the volume of recycled materials that comes to the recycling mills, it is only 10% of that. So we began to do communication telling people that recycling is directly connected to the mitigation of climate emergency impact. I think we really have to raise awareness among the population, but this is not going to solve the climate emergency. Let's be practical. In all research papers and visiting countries who are the leaders of this movement, no one said they were successful because of environmental education, not even in Europe. The most successful countries are those that have a regulation, those who impose fines to those who do not comply with the regulation. So as we understand this clear cause-effect relation, that's how we have to act. Governments must have the technical understanding of this and make it a requirement. Impose regulations to make that a requirement. About decentralizing efforts, it is so obvious. The states that sell more product have also a higher tax collection. So they become more easily the focus of our efforts. But it's really important to gain scale. That's why we keep talking about the mechanization of recycling processes, and that can be justified in large urban areas because they need a lot of volume. But look at Brazil. Brazil has more than 5,000 municipalities, and 96% of them have less than 50,000 inhabitants. 98% have less than 100,000 inhabitants. So we must be present throughout the territory and have small units that can connect the different local administrations and therefore connect these small towns to the chain. Glass is only recycled in the capital cities or close to glass recycling plants. However, we were able to design equipment so now we can deliver recycled glass as the industry needs, with the right processing to avoid the inclusion of other materials such as ceramics. And now we have a level of quality that they can pay our price, that is the ethical cost, so that we can have regular employees and also the freight of these materials. So if we have technical qualification, we can certainly overcome obstacles and gain economic feasibility. So we can have recycling plants in the countryside of Rondônia and Pernambuco, and they are connected to the glass production chain. Of course, it's easier if it is closer, if the distance is less. But of course, sometimes you need to work in remote areas. And so I believe in that. I believe in decentralized models so we can take opportunity to all regions of Brazil. Fabi, may I ask a question? Two questions. First, I believe there is a cultural barrier. To me, this is the greatest challenge we face. You did not speak about something that we do so well, which is the informal economy. Nobody spoke about taxing. And I think we have to work with the tax system. Otherwise, people will just think about their own private interest. I know I'm a bit older than you are, but today you have mileage programs, credit card cashback. We have lots of programs for the middle class. And that is not done for recycling, which is, after all, a mileage program. So why not use something more, maybe not aggressive, but maybe more marketing oriented, because recycling is another form of cashback. And everybody thinks of his or her own pocket. Even the Swedish think about their own pocket. Not only the climate crisis. So if we can align these interests, then so much the better. I believe there has to be a policy, by the petrochemical industries, by plastic manufacturers, so that we can really have an impact on people's pockets. Yes, the tax issue. I think Camilo participated in discussions, and Camilo actually spoke about that. The regulations, federal or national and local regulations. We do see efforts in this on this front. But taking back from your suggestion of a cashback, Jacob, I'm going to speak in English.
your experience globally, what you can share, what kind of experience or what kind of initiatives you can share showing us a successful project that can connect with the society and increase the demand, and also increase the recycling. I don't know if you can share in different, we have in Europe, I think, a reality, but also in other regions that is similar to Brazil.
Let me maybe just touch upon your idea about a mileage program for plastic recycling. I can say that the Alliance, we are operating in different parts. We are doing stuff in Thailand, we're doing things in China as well. And part of that is trying to test these models actually, right, where you have waste collection, plastic waste collection. So we have a project in Thailand where that model is being applied to simply bring or collect plastic, whether it's your own plastic, it can be any type of plastic, it can be PET bottles, it can be flexibles, it can be films, it can be your own or what you pick out of the environment, and you bring it back to a centralized place. So it's basically a machine that stands there. For beer, yeah, or anything, yeah, exactly. So you bring it back in here, into that machine, it's being weighed, it's being sorted as well, it's being registered as the type of plastic, and then you provide, and that's given a value, and that value is then a coupon, QR code that you can go to a supermarket and you can buy something for it, right? So there's this about attaching value to that plastic, right? Not only PET bottles, which I think is known as having a value no matter where we are in the world, but all the other packaging as well that is being used, sachets, flexibles, films, all of that has value. And if we can generate an economy, and an informal or maybe even over time a formal economy around that, then you are going to rise the incentives, right? We've done the same in China, where we are working with a private sector company, and we are talking about, you know, tens of thousands of tons of plastic waste that's being brought back, you know, through individual initiatives, and then is generated into almost a revenue for the individuals that they can then go to a supermarket or pay their electricity bill or whatever it is that needs to be paid, right? So the models are being tested, right? I think the challenge is, and maybe going back to your point as well, all of these models are small, right? They're in the pilot stage, they're in the demonstration stage, and until we really get to scale, we're not going to solve for the challenge that's almost growing on a daily basis. Let me give you an example of the Alliance. So we have run a number of projects, and one of the biggest one that we are running is in Indonesia right now. It's one of our key focus areas. It's close to Singapore, obviously, and we've been working very closely with the government of Indonesia and the different regions in which waste management is simply lacking as an infrastructure. So the Alliance is here supporting and working with the Asian Infrastructure and Investment Bank on a waste collection, waste management infrastructure program. This program, when it's fully up and running, will be covering 13 million people, right? So it's significant in terms of the size. And it's very basic in many ways what we are trying to solve for here. It is around putting in place bins, putting bins into households. So a green bin and a yellow bin. Awareness, education, behavior change, we talked about that as well. Right? Understanding among the populations and the citizens, the families and communities as to what is it that we can do as individuals as part of solving for a big challenge, circularity, but it's hard to explain maybe to everyone what circularity means. But really, what does it mean that we have a clean environment? What does it mean in terms of our daily actions that we can do to help solving for what we see as a huge problem for the environment, but what individuals see as something they don't really have an alternative solution for? So we are putting in place bins into these households, providing an educational program that comes with it, right, in the local language. Then we're also ensuring that the waste is then being picked up. It needs to be collected, right? So you have to have tricycles or trucks, depending on what's required for that particular community's or city's infrastructure. And then it goes to a centralized place where you have more sort of sophisticated sorting. It's still individuals that are doing it, so it's hand-based sorting, but that's where you really take out, because there's still sorting required, although household segregation has happened. And it's not only about plastic. Plastic only constitutes in these communities around 10-12% of the waste that's being generated, but there's other valuable material in there. And ultimately, that material is then put on the market. It's being sold to traders. Traders aggregate it because we need to have sizable amounts of a certain quality that's being bought then by recyclers, by petrochemical companies, everyone who needs that recycled content in order for them to be able to increasingly meet the demand for the PCR, post-resin consumer content that's required in packaging, right? But we need to get to scale. And if we can't get to scale, we are not solving for it. And that's why for us, partnerships is so critical. Policies, the enabling policies that needs to be in place, not only at the national level to drive this change, but also at the global level is absolutely fundamental. Camilla talked about the intergovernmental negotiating process where governments are trying to arrive at a conclusion for a global legally binding instrument on plastic pollution. Such an instrument, if enabling, is fundamental to driving the change that we need to see on the ground. It's fundamental for countries to start putting in their own regulation, but also start allocating national budgets. And it's fundamental to unlocking further capital that sits on the markets, in particular with the development finance institutions, including the World Bank, the IFC, the Asian Development Bank, the Inter-American Development Bank. The policies are ultimately the driver. But to get to scale, you need policy. And without that policy, and that's why we are very, very supportive of the negotiations, we are not going to be able to solve for this problem. Maybe just go back to your challenge as well, right? Linking it back to climate change. I mean, if we're looking at the climate agenda, right, it has taken us, 20, 25, 30 years to get to where we are today. We're looking at renewable energy solution and the innovation that was required in that space. That has taken many, many years. It's only now that we are starting really to see investable models, economic viability in these solutions and that innovation that has been put out on the market. If we're looking at the plastics agenda and plastic circularity or plastic waste, I mean, we don't need to go back more than 5 or 6 or 7 years, and nobody really spoke about this as an issue. But so we have come extremely far in a very short time, and I find that is very encouraging, and that's extremely positive. Governments has the attention to it. We see it here in Brazil. The international level has attention to it. I used to work with the United Nations before joining the Alliance to End Plastic Waste, and it takes years and years and years normally for governments just to agree on starting negotiations on a global legally binding instrument. In the case of plastic pollution, it took them literally only, 12, 18 months for the negotiations to get started. That's extraordinary. So there are a lot of positive stories out there as well. Capital is flowing. It's flowing faster than I think we have seen in any other area of sustainability. If we're only going a few years back, again, no resources were being allocated to this space. I can say from the Alliance, we have unlocked through our partnerships, using our own resources as a catalytic capital, more than $600 million. And so the private equity fund that I talked about, but just go to the development finance institutions, to the corporate banks. Capital exists out there, but it's sitting there a little bit idle now because it's want to invest in scalable solutions, and those are still not coming fast enough. So the momentum is there, but ultimately it comes back to us as individuals. We are all part of either creating the problem or solving the problem. Every action that we make has a direct contribution to it. We know that there are still climate deniers out there, unfortunately, but that's the case. I'm certain that there are no plastic waste deniers out there. Everyone recognizes that it is a problem that needs to be solved, but I think everyone also recognizes that each of us in our individual actions have a direct contribution to solving it. We decide what happens with this plastic bottle afterwards. We decide what happens with the packaging material when we have used it. We can put it in the right place or we can put it in the wrong place. We are fortunate here that we have the right place to put it. In many communities and cities around the world, they don't have any place to put it. So we need to enable them and to help that they get the infrastructure so that they also can make the right choice for the material that has value, but ultimately for the environment.
Muito bom. Tem mais perguntas então aqui?
Fantastic. Very good. We have a few other questions, so let us continue. Yes, you can ask your question. Good morning, everyone. My name is Anderson, and I'm representing Mata de São João, which is a small town in the state of Bahia. We are investing in selective collection of waste. We have built a recycling station, we purchased equipment, and we are now building a cooperative of waste pickers. We are focused on meeting our goals until 2030. However, we are facing two big challenges. And I think Erich and the other members of the panel can help us. First is the ethical value, when we sell these materials, when the cooperative sells these materials. The municipality is going to pay for the environmental service, and we do also have reverse logistics. But when we do the math, in the first 3 or 4 years, the cost is very high. And sometimes it is not worth it. You don't find someone to invest. And usually, the mayor is thinking about the election cycle. In 4 years, there will be a new election. So how can we increase the value of these materials? Because many of the waste materials are not recyclable. Especially in our region, we don't have a demand for many of these materials. And when we do, they pay very little. And even in manufacturing industries, many times we don't have a direct connection with manufacturing industry. There are people who are intermediaries in the business, so we always wait for the regulation by the federal government, but there are also some municipalities who would like to make progress faster. And that becomes difficult, either because we do not have access to the manufacturing industries that could buy these materials, or because of the price. So maybe there are other opportunities that we cannot see because we come from a small town, only 50,000 inhabitants. We've invested 15 million in infrastructure and to buy equipment, but we're facing these operating challenges to implement a bigger system. I will try and help. First, say hello to Anderson. It's been a while that we know each other, and we know your project. I don't think I can bring you a solution, but we are navigating on the same water. We're facing the same challenge. Today, we have 15 cities participating in our platform, aiming at building this systematic capacity to make recycling economically feasible. When we began with the platform, the cost per ton was much lower than it is today, because today the cost is higher. And there was a certain price for that material, which was never corrected, not even by inflation. So the gap would become bigger and bigger between our revenue and our cost. Our original plan was, for these small towns of 50,000 inhabitants, they would be able to have a certain volume of material, and then they would be able to pay for the cost by selling the recycled material. But this has changed. So now we are thinking about price per service. Somebody has to pay for the service that is being delivered. So we looked at the share responsibility. So the city must collect and transport the waste. So first, we began to talk to private companies to see how they could add more value to this chain. Because, that would further value their product. So maybe they could help us invest in the infrastructure, but this effort was not successful. But we still wanted to have an economically feasible operation. So we went back to the local government. We have to pay our waste pickers, and so we need payment per service. Anderson, and so in these 15 cities, at that time, we had only 14 towns. Now we have 15. But so then we built a business model of payment for service. First, the mayors didn't want to pay because they have a limited budget and they have to pay for education, they have to pay for healthcare. There are some towns that are having to shut down the hospital because they don't have a budget. And we say, well, now not only do you have to collect the waste and transport the waste to a landfill or even to a dumpster in illegal disposal, and now the mayors are going to have to pay for collection, transport, and processing. But this is the reality. You can complain, but you will have to deal with the reality. So first, we built an agreement framework, and that was analyzed by the court. And ultimately, today, we have a business model whereby the local administration has to pay for the service based on the volume of waste. So now, the local administration has to pay for processing of the recycled materials. So we can share with you the cost sheets, also the agreement, also the legal opinions, but you have to find a mayor who's willing to do that. Well, but I don't have enough budget. So maybe the state can provide funding through the ecological ICMS or other projects. So, of course, we will need the state or even the federal government to fund some of these activities. And finally, some materials cannot really be sold. This is a big challenge. And there is no magic solution, but we can work together to connect the industrial demand. So you can send a notification, the local authorities or the state authorities can send a notification to the industry. In the past, we could not sell glass, but now we can. Why? Because we have qualified this material. And that made a difference for us to be able to sell glass, because some companies want to buy that, but they want glass that has a certificate. So you see, there is a value also in the storytelling that comes together with the recycled material. So you can tell a story. The waste pickers are living in dignified conditions. We have the right working conditions for everyone in the cooperative. So then sometimes you have to try and attract the manufacturing industry. And you can get the help of local authorities, the local administration or the state administration. So this is what we have been doing. I know that sometimes this is a long way, but here there are no shortcuts. We have time for 2 more questions only.
With apologies, ask my question in English, if that's okay. A lot has been said around circularity and recycling. I'm a professor from Aston University in the UK, and I lead a project which is supported by the UN, which is a plastics intervention project we're delivering in Ghana. And as part of this project, we're doing a lot of policy work. And one of the things we realized in Ghana, as is the case in many global south countries, is that recycling rates are very low. Due to challenges around infrastructure, sorting, the economics of it. And I think we've had a lot of those challenges today. Of course, that is in line with global trends. In recent reports, the World Economic Forum and the OECD put global recycling rates at 9%, which is very, very low. One of the things that we started considering was, in terms of our policy work, was to move the needle a bit around plastic alternative products and non-plastic substitutes as a part of the conversation around circularity. Of course, recycling is important and that will continue, but we need to have something else in the mix as a way of trying to really address the problem and to move circularity forward. And so what we did was to create a methodology which allowed us to develop an evidence-based policy, national policy blueprint, working with the government of Ghana, which sets out a clear pathway for developing a plastic alternatives and non-plastic substitutes industry in the country. And by good grace of God, the government is going to start implementing it this autumn. Whilst I've been here in Brazil, it's my first time in Brazil, I've noticed that there is a lot of innovation around non-plastic substitutes and plastic alternatives. Fantastic innovation. But I'm still trying to wrap my head around where the policy is in terms of whether there is a policy that is there to support a plastic alternatives and non-plastic substitutes industry in Brazil, because I think globally that's where the trend is moving. So that's my question: is there a policy structure here in Brazil that's designed to support the growth and establishment of a plastic alternatives and non-plastic substitutes industry in the country? And the reason why I'm asking is that the work we did around this methodology in West Africa, which we're now applying not just to Ghana but to the Ivory Coast as well, was designed with a global South mentality, the idea that we could apply it to other countries in the global South. So is this kind of policy structure one that exists here in Brazil? And if not, do you think it's something that is needed?
Obrigada pela pergunta.
Thank you for the question. I can answer with what Abiquim has been doing, and your question is closely related to the insertion of plastic circularity within the movement of combat to climate change and sustainability. Brazil today has a very privileged position when we think of raw materials and the kind of energy used in Brazil. We have cleaner energy, cleaner raw materials for the production chain. Abiquim has been working with the legislative branch, with the executive branch of power, in order to promote sustainability within chemical industry. We want to give benefits so that sustainable, alternative, renewable raw materials be used in processes. And in order to encourage their use, we have to give them breaks, benefits. That requires a very solid regulatory framework in order to allow companies to innovate. Within the context of renewable raw materials or renewable energy matrix Brazil has, Abiquim, as the representative of the Brazilian chemical industry, has been working with the federal administration in order to design a special regime to foster sustainability. I think this is a federal view. We have specific local legislations that have encouraged the use of recycled material. An example here in São Paulo is plastic bags. According to the standard, they should comply with the standards, and they use 50% of renewable material. So our biopolymer solution, as mentioned in the previous panel, is a solution because we are talking about renewable and sustainable material. But this hasn't been rolled out all over Brazil. It's something that's specific to São Paulo. Good afternoon. I am Cílio from Bow Group. I see that the stakeholders of the chain are deeply committed with the agenda, but there is a part that hampers the chain. Sonia mentioned greenwashing. I'd like to know from Jacob how you are fighting greenwashing abroad, and how has Brazil been tackling this greenwashing done by a few companies? Jacob, you'll have to leave, right? But I was going to suggest that you answer this question and then you may leave. I know you have a commitment at noon, so if you could answer and make your final comments, and then you can go. And thanking you warmly for your presence here.
Showing impact and action, right, in order to address whether it's greenwashing claims or any other claim that may come the way to those who want to demonstrate that there are solutions to this particular challenge, right? I think what we have seen is, and I think that's very encouraging, is the private sector, and you heard that also here from the panel, but also through the companies that are part of the alliance, they fundamentally believe that they are part of creating the solutions that are required in this space. We talk about the importance of policy, there's no doubt about that, talk about the importance of financing, but also the critical element of innovation. And that innovation needs to come from the private sector. So our focus, we call ourselves a do tank. So it's all about getting the things done, showing the type of solutions that are required here, recognizing there's a slate of solutions that are required. There's not just one solution. Waste management is an important part of it. Recycling is a critical part of it. But it can't operate in isolation. And going back to the question earlier, right, there are elements around design, there are conversations around where is plastic needed and where may it not be needed, right? So there's a range of actions that needs to be implemented by the different actors and stakeholders out there. To counter greenwashing, to respond to greenwashing, is all about getting it done, showing it can be done. And I think at the level of the Alliance, in the spans of our existence of 5 years, we are very proud with having made the transition from saying we want to do to actually doing and showcasing that we can prevent the leakage of tens of thousands and hundreds of thousands of tons of plastic waste into the environment.
Thank you so much. You have to go to another appointment. Marina has just mentioned to me. Thank you so much for... Como temos mais perguntas,
Since we have other questions, Camila would like to go on. At Abiquim, we understand that in order to avoid greenwashing, it's necessary to demonstrate it's necessary that the company shows that it meets given compliance requirements. So we should have public policies requiring proof or evidence to prove that the company is not simply greenwashing. And Abiquim has been talking to the federal government so that the federal government enact smart policies, making companies abide by the legislation. I have an example, which is the green stamp. The chemical industry was selected with 7 products for a pilot project of the federal green stamp. Will draw up criteria so that those selected products can prove that they comply with the standards and therefore they can receive the green stamp. This is a typical example of a program that avoids the practice of greenwashing. We are at the beginning of the program. We have a very short time to make it happen. We have been working together with the Ministry of Industry, Trade, and Development so that the standards are drawn up very quickly and so that we can select the chemical products that will have to prove that they comply with the requirements.
eu acho que eu acho
Well, consumers are becoming sort of skeptical. For instance, there are green directives in Europe in order to decide what can be said, what cannot be said. In the United States, some states are enacting legislation about that, and they are investigating companies that are speaking shallowly about the issues. So if companies do it seriously, and adding up to what you said and bringing it to our reality, reverse logistics is our reality, and it's a bit tricky, because we have a financial flow for that. We have a flow of materials that can be used by the steel industry. The industry is really interested in doing better. So I think there are opportunities for the consumer to see who's being serious about it. And I think the industry can use it as an opportunity to show who's serious, who's not. There is a consumer skepticism because there are many wrong things being said. So the industry can do better, and I think that the legislation in Brazil should keep up with other legislation being enacted all over the world. Yes, how to fight greenwashing with information, transparency, and again, regulatory accountability. Today, you cannot say anything in the product packaging. You cannot say that the cereal bar gives you a given benefit if that's not real. So there is regulation to avoid fallacies on packaging. Much has been said talking about packaging again. Stamps that give the impression that the packaging is recycled, but that's not true. It's not a government seal or a federal agency seal. It's a private seal that you pay for, and that gives rise to confusion. The average consumer cannot judge that properly. Is that a BOPP, a technical material, green seal, so a green stamp? So you have to impose standards, how to communicate given things, and that will decrease in packaging as a whole. Since we are running late, we're going to have one more question, and then I'll ask you a minute for your final comments, and we'll wrap up the panel. Good morning. My name is Renata. I come from Maceió, northeastern state. I work with Mobilize, with business impact consulting, talking about to Erich, talking about packaging. I'd like to know if you map companies who work with certain packagings that are harmful to waste pickers. In Maceió, we have a green tax aiming at municipalities that have selected collection, and also we are including the protection to waste pickers. All waste pickers are hired by the urban cleaning services, but they are not paid by the sorting. The sorting depends on a draw. But what about these companies? You gave the example of the blue PET bottle. They cause a serious problem. Are they mapped? Are they identified? We solved the problem with Tetra Pak. Tetra Pak started a recycling process in Maceió and other municipalities, and they pay to all cooperatives, from very small ones to large ones. But some packagings are very problematic, not only in the Northeast, all over Brazil. We know the brands. I know if you do something about it. We have a WhatsApp group. I'm going to include you there. No, that's a joke. Well, of course, we have a WhatsApp group. Well, this brand, don't buy water from this brand because this packaging is harmful. But this is a private group. I don't think it's a very difficult issue. I don't know if there is control about the rate of recyclability of given packagings for you to act upon them. But how does the process of offsetting of packagings work? It's self-declaratory, so companies go there, they fill out the whole volume of packagings placed on the market by state. Some states, as the state of São Paulo, still classify, I want to know what's PET, if it is glass. There are states which still don't do that. And sometimes it's difficult to map, but no Brazilian state says, look, I use blue PET, they are not mapped. Would that a possibility? Yes, because if you have a more sustainable packaging, it will be easier to recycle, so you don't wait on the cleaning systems. And for instance, when you have non-recycled packagings, for instance, flexible bottles that cannot be recycled today, they could be offset with the simple packagings, monomaterial, etc. So I make a non-sustainable option that generates a burden to the local government that will have to put it in a dump. Whenever the local authorities spend money on that, it does not spend money on health, education, and security. And this is not attributed to the user of the packaging. We have been talking to regulatory agencies in order to strengthen the reverse logistics legislation. And one of the possibilities is proportionate compensation. If you're not able to recycle a given packaging and you sell it, you have to recycle more than that ton you put on the market. So some co-creations about how to use regulations in order to make the company to adopt a highly recyclable material in Brazil, than simply putting the product on the shelf without thinking of externalities. I think that's possible. That's not the case yet, but hard to recycle packaging touch upon another point, what's delivered, EPS packaging. That doesn't come from Nestle, Ambev, where you have inspection. So there is a constant government complaint, which is we have to put into reverse logistics a high number of companies which are still not there. There is a huge universe of companies not doing anything, and they don't budge. When you look at this wide basis of SMEs that, companies that deliver food in an EPS packaging, this is all over Brazil. So we have to tackle that wide basis of companies still using recycling material. Tomorrow we are going to talk about design, and we'll have the opportunity to talk about that, how important it is to talk about design in order to avoid problems at the end of the cycle. And data is relevant and show the reality. We did some work here bringing the owner of the brands and showing them where their packagings go in order to spur or spearhead this transformation. So tomorrow we're going to talk about design, and we might address this theme. And I'd like to give the floor for the final comments of each member of the panel. Well, these conversations are a lot of food for thought. Well, I'm not romantic, but I am optimistic about the moment we are living. Several things happening in Brazil, several companies doing waste management, smaller and bigger companies. We are addressing some reverse logistics importance. The Brazilian plan of circular economy may unfold into other working plans. Europe is enacting legislation about it, and that might inspire other regions. In our industry, for instance, I mentioned that we have a metal workflow. We have to reflect on how to act upon the ends. I think we have to connect people who are able to invest in reverse logistics, and the people at the front. For instance, Dango, a chocolate manufacturer. This chocolate manufacturer decided to better compensate people who pick and sort cocoa seeds. So sometimes it's difficult because you have 10 different middlemen in the chain, and many of them have a high margin. So there are many opportunities ahead. The federal government is talking a lot about it. There is a lot to do, but as I said, I'm not romantic, but I am optimistic. I think there will be very interesting things coming along. And what I said in the beginning, we don't want to pay more, but we are investing heavily in resources, technical cooperation with Braskem, other marketplace players, doing meetings with cooperatives. We are looking for innovations to allow us to go forward. Our global CEO said, if we need investment, we will make these investments. We want to develop innovation, and we want regulation, so the appropriate regulation. So this is an interesting moment we're going through. There are very important points that should be placed on the right path.
Now, my final message after today's conversation, which was really interesting because each one of us brings a different point of view and different examples of action. So for the current transition, actions have to reconcile technical knowledge, economic feasibility, and environmental feasibility. So we need a lot of collaboration, plus investment, funding, and also smart and transparent public policies. After today's discussion, above all, we have to understand the impact of public policies on productive chains, on value chains, and also we have to look at competitiveness. Because if our public policies do not consider competitiveness, then we will not reach feasibility in our value chain. The manufacturing industry is a very important bond in this chain of transition, and it can certainly help. So I believe this is my takeaway from today's discussion. Thank you, Fabi, for this opportunity to talk about our work and our vision at Abiquim. Thank you. Well, as my final message, I want to say that peace will be a utopia in a world where justice is unfeasible. And feasibility or unfeasible is something that I always hear in the discussions where I participate. Oh, this price will make the product unfeasible. But if fairness makes a product unfeasible, well, then so the product is unfeasible. I mean, if the product is generating a lot of externalities for the society, then it's no good for a society who seeks sustainability. But sometimes it's not that it's not feasible. We just need more commitment. And before that, we need regulations, because then you will have requirements to play the game. And if products are not feasible, well, then they're not feasible. Let us discontinue the product and let us go back to our innovation design to try and have a different product, a different solution. So we certainly need commitment. But of course, we certainly have to do what is needed. And doing what is needed has to be feasible. We just need focus and willingness to do it. And let us share more, because our society has become over too vertical. Too few with so much, and so many with nothing. I believe we can do different. I also feel optimistic, despite my experience. But if I was an optimist in 2006, today I have a reason to be even more optimistic, because we have made progress, thank God. So that's it. But we have to work to make this transition faster. Very good. Now, let me thank you all for your collaboration, for your participation. Thank you for your knowledge, for this exchange we've had. It is clear that we need more cooperation, more collaboration to face these challenges we all know. But let's think about the future. We are making progress. As Jacob mentioned, behavior is key. Everything we do, let us think about what we can do different back at home, with our children, with the people we have a relationship with, and also at work. We have to become examples and inspiration for this transformation. Thank you all very much, and see you tomorrow, because we will have panels tomorrow about recycled packaging, packaging design. And Yuri, would you like to speak about this, please? Yes, thank you. I have not introduced myself. My name is Yuri, and I am responsible for this space, Cazoolo, which is a collaborative design lab founded by Braskem and made available to all. Our goal is to bring together all of these bonds, from raw material to packaging and brands. We have a relationship with waste picker cooperatives to also listen to them. So those of you who haven't been here before, this is Fabio, that's Tarso, and the three of us are here. We can tour you around our space. We have a project to recycle delivery packaging. So now, I know we are a little bit late, but feel free to interact with our team. Also, Gustavo is here from our team so that you can learn more about our project. On May 29, we will be at Unibis Cultural to launch the Recycling Academy for Waste Pickers. This is our educational project. And we will have government authorities, our sponsors, and waste pickers. So you can come to the meeting in person, but it will also be streamed. So check it out. Stay tuned. Thank you all. Thank you all very much.